The ceremony of British royalty has many similarities to Egypt. I had to take a closer look into the notion that it came from there. I didn't know where my investigation would take me, but I have found some patterns which I think are pretty interesting, so I'd like to share them with you. In fact, at this point it feels like a duty. What I have discovered has blown my mind, so please stick with me to the end, because I think we will be correcting, not rewriting, correcting history. And in case you have stumbled upon this video, I just want to show this photo of Akhenaten. So let's go. Here are some key chapters we will be looking at. The founding saints of the Breton lands. Cornwall, Wales, and Brittany, France. The Tudors and the origin of the Breton flag. King John of England and Sons. The importance of the ports in Cornwall and Essex. Henry VIII and his people. Elizabeth and the snake. These forays over many hundreds of years onto British land have ultimately been a process that started even further back. And it's likely possible that the Celtic people, with their artistry and beautiful metalwork, have some parallel to Ethiopian art, which we can see in this comparison here. Although what we call Ethiopia today was a greater region, most of Africa in fact. For the purpose of this video, any mention of Ethiopia will mean East or Northeast Africa. Karnak, Egypt. Why is there also a Karnak in Brittany? And the same standing stones can be found in Tia, Ethiopia. I found it interesting that the sword pictured is called a galon, like gallant knights. This map shows France as Gallia Celtica. So it seems logical that it was settled by Galans from East Africa. Today we call it Gaul, and the obvious connection is lost. Here is something to consider. Nubia is the region south of Egypt, where the Blue and White Nile rivers meet in Sudan. Once a glorious king or queendom with statues and pyramids in a different fashion to those at Egypt. I think it was just below this region that the land of Judea was shown to be, and this is its symbol, the lion and the cross. It became the early emblem of France, or at least a northern region of it. Why are lions and leopards symbols of France and Britain when they have never been native to these lands? Following on from Nubia, Edward the Black Prince, Prince of Wales, Duke of Aquitaine and Cornwall in the 1300s. I was very excited to find a portrait from the National Gallery with the word Cornubi as Cornwall. Cor seems to mean together, correlate, corroborate. I could find no other source for the word Nubia other than Northeast Africa, which, as you'll see by the end of the video, has big significance. And just look at this picture. Edward was very much a black prince. He was the first to use the 3 ostrich feathers. Mary Asek. The moment I heard this name I thought, that is Egyptian. He was a Cornish and Breton saint from a ducal family, whose legend was written into a play much later. Conan, Mary Adak, the legendary king of Brittany at the time, wanted to arrange a political marriage for him, but Mary Asek preferred to renounce his inheritance and become a priest. He performed several miraculous cures. Encountering persecution from King Tudor, he returned to Brittany to found a chapel in the lands of the Viscounts of Rohan. His reputation for miracles attracted crowds. He assisted the Viscount in dealing with brigands who infested his lands by bringing down the fire of heaven upon them. He is reputed to have healed many lepers and disabled people, to have driven off the highwaymen of Jocelyn through prayer, to have made water spring from solid rock, and to have calmed a storm. He was elevated to become Bishop of Vannes. So this is what I found on the name. Murray or Mary is an ancient Egyptian name meaning beloved. It was common during the Old and Middle Kingdom, and very frequent during the New Kingdom. If you Google Meriadoc, Mary from Lord of the Rings will show up, and I remembered that J.R.R. Tolkien was heavily inspired by Ethiopian kingship. Searching for the meaning of the word Asak, I came across a Borneo translation of pineapple fiber. An Old Scots basket, which is like fiber. A New Hampshire tribe not recognized as Native American. Keo Asak meaning young pine. Could Mary Asak mean beloved pine? Then I looked up Hebrew, where Asak means palm tree. In Hebrew, ado means sing, chant, recite, example Adonai, meaning chanting the Torah. Similarly, Adon means Lord, Master. The land now known as Brittany was known as Armorica. What's interesting is that the earliest saint associated with this region is Anne, grandmother of Jesus, who purportedly appeared to a man and spoke to him in Breton. Could the Breton saints have come from Egypt? Or a simpler pastoral society further south, setting up churches and holy wells in France and then Cornwall? Depictions of these holy men show large cephalic head shape, like Ethiopians, some with the shaved monk circle. Take note of the head cap. There must have been some influence between the Bretons and Egyptians as I found this. Ankou is a folklore figure of Celtic culture in Brittany. He is described as a supernatural being who leads the dead to their eternal rest and opens the hell's gates once a year. Ankou was an Egyptian vizier or advisor during the early 13th dynasty in the late Middle Kingdom. The highest court counsel to the king. I wonder if there is a connection. Tudor Maw. The translation is Theodore the Great or Great Tudor. This tyrannical king was associated with the persecution of the early saints of Cornwall and Wales. The Duke of Brittany is portrayed as a hero fighting to save Cornwall from the evil King Tudor, and Saint Mary Asak is portrayed as resisting King Tudor's bad government. So we can see that there's some early brutality in the Tudor family. And they are Welsh, which I had no idea. The Tudors of Penmanid in Anglesey, from whom came Owen Tudor and later Henry VII. What does this Breton flag represent? This discovery blew my mind. It's called the Gwen Ha Du, meaning white and black. If Gwen means white, then Du means black. Du Chi. But what does Chi mean? I found that Chi means house in Hebrew. Duchy means black house. I was also informed that in Yoruba language, West Africa, Dudu means black. So, a confirmation. And fellow researchers are well aware that Dub also means black. In ancient Sanskrit, Kal means time or eternity. In Proto-Germanic, Kal signifies strong or mighty. In certain African cultures, Kal is associated with wisdom and leadership. In Celtic folklore, Kal is often linked to mystical powers and represents a guardian spirit. In ancient India, Kal was associated with deities and played a significant role in religious rituals. In ancient Egypt, Kal was revered as a symbol of power and immortality. In medieval Europe, Kal was associated with knights and warriors, representing bravery and honor. Of ducal family then means black spiritual power. This does not mean superiority, but of shamanic lineage in my opinion. Then I came across this image, and I think it tells us a lot about the beliefs of the Tudor clan. The black symbols are often referred to as ermine, which is an animal that has the same flecks in their white fur, and so they used this to make the royal robes. But the pattern is actually representing a Zaashra, a worship rite for fire or water gods, of 3 component offerings. At first I thought these were mountains, but then realized that they are something else. I get a hesitant feeling about what this means, and even putting it out here, because it's something I think is playing out in society like a bad dream. They are liquid drops on a pile of ashes. It's a sacrifice, right? I don't even want to use the term for it. Offerings can be blood, breast milk, or urine, I believe. Before giving more thoughts on this, let me explain the motto. Hintak eget em mervel zeatra. Sources say this means sooner death than defilement. I'm not so sure. Lok means lake. I figured tak might mean land. Ken sounds like kin. Could it mean fatherland? It also sounds like Kentucky, which was probably Kentuck, and it is thought to be land of our fathers. The other words I'm not sure about. In Ga language, which is Ghana, Togo, Benin, Nigeria, Kentok means, instead, funnily enough at the same time as investigating. Someone said that their family used to call their farmhouse the homestead, so maybe it was kinstead. The tribal significance cannot be overlooked. In Africa, the Batamariba, Mercy and Mundari tribe wear horns, as well as the Kemetic deities Het, Heru and Amun-Ra. In ancient Kemet, horns are a symbol of the crescent of the moon, when the star begins its way to the full moon. Horns are usually attached to animals that identified with moon or lunar deities. This family tree took a while to become clear in my head, but now I see, and it is quite telling. Henry III is depicted like this on coins. Thick lips, and something peculiar going on with his hair, perhaps, with these round sides, like rollers. He clearly has nappy beard hair. One of the coins shows HERI. Wikipedia had this to say. Harry is a common name in the Faroes today, probably not surviving as a traditional name, but revived and put into use again in later times. Harry may mean Hare, Alepus europaeus, for which the modern Icelandic name is Harry. Faroe Islands equals Faroes. And Harry is used mostly in the Swahili language, and its language of origin is African Swahili. He kept a menagerie at the Tower of London, a tradition begun by his father. His exotic specimens included an elephant, a leopard, and a camel. The Wikipedia page is really interesting. Henry III is the son of King John of England, and his brother was King Richard the Lionheart. Henry's brother was Richard, Earl of Cornwall, named after his uncle. This is the oldest royal effigy in England and shows King John with his sons. I think those round things could be their ears. I'm also noting that this is green stone, commonly found in places like Tanzania and Madagascar. Henry's brother Richard became the Earl of Cornwall, and revenue from this county made him one of the wealthiest men in Europe. Tin mining was essential to the flourishing industry of weapons armory, and who knows what other metals may have been mined in this region. The crest for Cornwall is 15 gold bezants, which are like rounds. So gold was clearly also a big deal to these kings. But with no real industry in Britain, it can only have been imported and traded from Africa. These two maps of Cornwall, one of them being from 1331, show the names Musafola and Falamua, which later became Falamua, then Falmouth. It is intriguing because Musa was the king of the Mali Empire at that time. The name Fola derives its roots from Africa and carries with it the profound meaning of honor. In many African languages, the word Fola or similar variations are synonymous with ideas such as respect, dignity, and reverence. Musafola became mousehole. The family name Mua is of African origin, often found in regions like East Africa. It may signify leadership or strength and is associated with communities that have rich cultural histories. The name reflects a connection to ancestry and heritage, emphasizing communal values and traditions. I want to point out that when I search for names or words, I'm not selecting what I want to find with any bias. What is coming up in the search results is what I'm relaying here. It's super exciting to me. There is another name, Archemua, which is Dartmouth. So looking at Arta, we get a city in Djibouti, Somalia. Plymouth is Antona or Primua. It's unclear. Between Plymouth and Dartmouth is Salcombe and Bantham. On these old maps, Godestes and Koditala. A user from Nigeria says the name Godes is of Nigerian origin and means source. Ko is Mozambique. Kitala? Tala means waste in Swahili. Or Jitala, to look at in Swahili. Maybe it's something to do with mining waste. Near Bantham in present day is a place called Chalabaro. The name Chala is of African Ethiopian origin, and it is predominantly used in the Oromo language. In this language, Chala means best, superior, or paramount. Lake Chala, also known as Lake Chala, is a crater lake that straddles the border between Kenya and Tanzania. I could also make out the name Dirama, possibly a connection between Ramesses and Rama of ancient India, and Puthemua, which is present-day Fawi. Pite is very old, meaning wing. Think Pet-I in Egypt. Fawi had a group of pirates who were given license to seize enemy vessels during the 100-Year War. They were known as the Gallants, which, as I showed earlier, were Ethiopian Somali. Edward III was king during this time. Rochester Castle looks to me like Gondar, Ethiopia. It is funny that Lord of the Rings was heavily inspired by East Africa. Just a coincidence, I'm sure. Built to command an important river crossing, the architect was Gandalf, Bishop of Rochester. It was one of the earliest such buildings in England. He also engineered Colchester Cathedral and the Tower of London. Notice the head cap he wears is the same as the earlier saint I showed, and looks to me like it could have been a stretched material over buns. Like these women here. The interior of the cathedral has a Celtic Ethiopian architecture. Chester or Cester means fort, so I wondered what Ro means. Checking Niger-Congo languages, the only one that turned out a translation is Yoruba, and it translates to machine or engine. Keep in mind the terms battery and devices for forts. Nearby Richborough Fort, or Ritupis. Artupi means family in Somali and red in Yoruba. Ebbsfleet. Eb means God. It's an indigenous Somali word for higher power. Dover used to be called Dubris. The translator detected Oromo, a Cushitic people native to the Oromia region of Ethiopia and parts of northern Kenya. It is also a place in Lower Juba, Somalia. Then I noticed the D looks more like a B. I couldn't get a clear translation on this. Morris, the engineer, was responsible for the building. Camel Odinum, the ancient Roman name for what is now Colchester in Essex, was an important city in Roman Britain and the first capital of the province. The Somali are characterized by camel pastoralism, while the Oromo are characterized by cattle. Odin means wood in Somali, so camel odinum was camel wood. Archaeological evidence found mammal and bird bones imported from overseas. Here's what a report said. The first piece of evidence is represented by the size of the cattle remains. This is very large and suggests the presence of non-native, recently imported, livestock. The second piece of evidence is the simultaneous presence of a sparrow-hawk tarsum tatarsus and a large number of thrush bones. This is tentatively interpreted as an early indication of hawking. Could the keeping of birds of prey be a sport started in England? A report states. This places falconry in Kenya as being very much older than in most countries, in fact on par with those nations that firmly state that falconry is part of their ancient cultural heritage, like the UK, for example. On the word Colchester. Col means enemy in Somali, so Colchester could mean enemy fort. Here is a coin minted by a people called the Trinovantes. They're in Essex, moving towards where London would now be. You get coins minted there from about 35 BC, so 20 years after Caesar's expedition, by a king called Adade Amaris. This is a guy. We only know his name through his coins. There's no mention of him in any classical sources. He's the king of the Trinovantes. What we can tell from his coins is that he moves his capital from Hertfordshire, so in the west of his kingdom, to Essex, to a place called Camel Odanon, which today is Colchester, in Essex. That's all we know about him. So if the east ports of England, the waterway leading into the great city of London, were settled by so-called Anglo-Saxons, the only thing left to do was to look up the word Saxon. Saxon is a Somali word, meaning dish or plate. Essex is known as flatland. Could the East Saxon borough of Swal come from Sawahil? Swahili, meaning of the coast. And here's the great man himself. If you're having trouble with the lack of artistic evidence, then take a listen to this quote. And then there is the impact on this country's artistic and intellectual heritage. No one can be sure of the exact figure, but it is estimated that the destruction started and legalized by Cromwell amounted to 97% of the English art then in existence. Statues were hacked down. Frescoes were hacked to bits. Mosaics were pulverized. Illuminated manuscripts were shredded. Wooded carvings were burned. Precious metalwork was melted down. Shrines were reduced to rubble. This vandalism went way beyond a religious reform. It was a frenzy, obliterating the artistic patrimony of centuries of indigenous craftsmanship with an intensity of hatred for imagery and depicting the divine that has strong and resonant parallels today. This is Sir Nicholas Bacon, right-hand man to Henry and keeper of the Great Seal. He was from Essex. And this is the face of Anne Boleyn's father, Thomas. Clearly Nigerian or Middle African genes. Is this a Polish name, Zbiwole? His brass memorials are in a church in Kent on the East Coast. Brasses were made and laid down on the continent before they were used in England, but they are found now in greater number in England than elsewhere in Europe. On the continent, they occur in Belgium, North Germany, Poland, Holland. What's cool is that he has a griffin under his feet, like he had one as a pet. Anything is possible. If you're not getting it so far, then look at this coin of Henry's sister Mary Rose. I came across an image of Elizabeth I, which shows the base layer for a painting. We can see her bone structure is genetically specific and, to me, looks East African, with round eye sockets and very distinctive eyes, high forehead, narrow chin. I'm not sure it matches with the features of Henry, but perhaps she looked more like her mother in Boleyn. Then there's the shocker, and the biggest clue that I could be right about the Egypt connection. Aside from the obvious appearance of her skin, which looks like whitewashing, this portrait was found to have a snake hidden under layers of paint. Here is what an article said. The meticulous conservation process carried out by Nicole Ryder involved an entire clean, with minor losses corrected before it was X-rayed and certain pigments were analyzed. The rejuvenation had revealed elements that have been hidden over time, she said. But the house could not disclose exactly what was discovered during the conservation process. It makes me wonder about these two portraits. Wadjet was an ancient Egyptian goddess of the pre-dynastic period, known as the Green One. In my opinion, honoring the race that habited these lands before evolving into the dynastic hybrids, you could say. The Ubaidians are evidence of reptilian genesy. But the snake is symbolic for the Kundalini power within the human body and ultimate attainment of reaching source at the crown. And this portrait is probably the most accurate depiction of her true face. The scale of cover-up here is almost unbelievable. And if it wasn't for the National Portrait Gallery in Scotland, I would never have seen the evidence presented here. The last point I want to make about Elizabeth is her hair. The color of it is irrelevant. With her massive style, it's not hard to believe she bleached it. Look at the Mundari tribe of Sudan. She decorated with pearls often, and this is something we do see in tribal communities in Africa to this day, with shells. When was the last time you saw a Scottish redhead with pearls in their hair? Unless it is very coarse, trinkets will not hold. Once you see it, it cannot be unseen.